Welcome to A Mile Deep, and I am here with Troy Daronco today. Hi, Troy. How are you doing, man?
Hey, doing great. How are you?
Troy is a life coach. He specifically works with men. He is he's also a leadership coach like me, and I really wanted to have this conversation because Troy and I met just over a connection call a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed talking to Troy. Troy's been a coach for over 14 years, and he helps men and women, but he specifically helps men in the area of leadership for themselves and their relationships. And dude, like, I think it was such an important. I think it is such an important conversation right now for men to lead powerfully in their work, in their lives, in their professional lives. And I thought of no better person to have this discussion with. So I'm excited to talk through this stuff with you today. Welcome to A Mile Deep.
Thank you very much. I've been listening to this podcast. I think I've caught every episode you've done so far. And I like how much personality you bring into this. It doesn't feel scripted. It feels loose and easy and approachable.
Thank you, man. Well, that perfectly describes me. Loose and easy, not the loose and easy, but maybe comfortable, and that's how I like to coach. But dude, it is very unscripted. I think one of the things I wanted to bring to podcasting is a mix of really, really high quality education with a good amount of free flow conversation. And I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast will be listening in their car. They want to listen to two guys who really understand not only the craft, but the people that they work with and they serve. And so thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate that you have taken the time to come on today. Let's just dive straight in, man. I think one of the things that really struck a chord with me when we were talking is we talked briefly about nice guys. And that's where I'd like to start. It might be, so just for the listeners who are listening in, if you've never heard the term a nice guy was a term coined by Dr. Robert Glover, a guy that I've worked with and done workshops with and flown over to the UK to speak. And a nice guy is someone that pleases, that will have no boundaries, lets people walk all over him, will do anything to meet the needs of others so that he gets his needs met and he is loved. And I noticed that so many men that I worked with were nice guys. But there's something that Troy positioned really, really well, and I'd like you to talk to this for a second if you can, Troy. It's like, I'd always seen it as such a negative. It was almost like, if you were a nice guy, it was such a bad thing. It was such a bad thing. And it was actually, you were the first person I've ever heard give an alternative perspective on this. So I'd love for you to start there, because I think it's a really good part of the conversation to start with, especially in context of leadership for men.
Yeah, I appreciate that. To me, nice guy can be a superpower. Being able to walk into a room and read it in a moment so that I know that I'm safe, huge benefit. Being able to really evaluate somebody standing in front of me and seeing if they're full of bullshit or not. Knowing, again, to me, nice guy stuff is all about being safe. Yes, it's about meeting needs, but it's the need for safety if we really run that out to its sort of sometimes illogical conclusion. So if I am walking into a room of people I simply do not know, being able to take the metaphorical temperature of that room can help a lot as far as me engaging there, judging where they are emotionally at that moment. It can be a superpower. There's a lot more too. Conflict avoidant. Avoiding conflict can be a good thing in a moment as long as we know why we're avoiding it. If I'm avoiding the conflict and I know how to be a peacemaker, peacekeeper, people are much more apt to engage in very difficult conversations with me. So again, there's always, for however much dark we judge in nice guy stuff, I would suggest go looking for the light side, or the bright side of it, the benefit.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked about what you pointed out, really, because I had become so obsessed with it being such a bad trait in me. Even on the call we were chatting, I was like, I definitely have got nice guy tendencies. I can see them. I've got areas of my life I've worked on a lot in order to transcend some of the maybe lesser qualities of a nice guy. But I'd never really thought about looking at the good qualities and embellishing those, like really just being able to, I'm very, very, very good at temperature checking a room. I'm very, very good at that. I'm very good at working out how to speak to people. I'd never seen that until you pointed it out, so I'm really grateful.
What's another benefit you found, Ben? If you can think of one.
What was another benefit I found from being a nice guy? I think is actually having gone through the struggles of not having any boundaries. Like, I think the something that I learned really, really early on is, like, I was probably about 25, and someone said to me, "Oh, Ben, you've got no boundaries," and I hadn't a clue what a boundary was. Like, I didn't even know what it was at that point in my life. I was late for people. I was chaotic. I would stay way later at work than I needed to serve everyone else and come home and fall out with my partner. I was a workaholic. I was just literally like, no boundaries whatsoever, especially ones I communicated with my partner. And having gone through many broken relationships in order to work that out, I quickly became very, very good at articulating what a boundary was. And I've taught boundaries in coaching and in a lot of the courses I've done for a long time, because I think sometimes it's like you're very, very good at teaching something when you've had to go through hell to learn it. And like, I know people like my partner Poppy is very boundaried. She probably hasn't got as much conscious competence as what I have. She's just like a natural. She's very boundaried. So yeah, that was a definite benefit. What about you, Troy? Is that a background? Did you come from a nice guy tendency in your background?
I did. Absolutely. One of my first memories is standing at our kitchen window at home and waiting for my mom or dad to get out of their vehicle and looking at them to, again, take a temperature to see who was walking through the door.
Wow. Yeah.
How safe was I in that moment? And who did I need to be to soften that, to mediate the sort of blowback that could happen? Well, again, I believe that we can spin it to our benefit. So now you come into a session, Ben. Let's say you come into a session, and I can read you in a moment. I know actually where we're starting. Instead of where we talked about starting, I'm going to meet you where you are. Not where I think we should go or where I think we should be or even what we talked about. To me, that's a huge benefit. I think it's part of the reason why I've been able to coach for so long and why my clients stay with me for so long is I meet them where they are. But that was all born out of how I was in my family and my need for safety.
Yeah, there was actually Dax was on the podcast last week. I got one of my first coaches, and like something that Dax said years ago was, "Is your client in the state to train?" Like, so I started coaching in the gym, and one of the things that he said is that look at your client as they walk through the door. Are they in the state to train? Are they present? What's their nervous system like? Are they stressed? Are they overwhelmed? Have they slept well? Are they hydrated? And there's so many assumptions that we have to make and calibrations we have to make as a great trainer, because I remember like some women and some men who would come into my gym, they weren't in the state to train. They weren't in the state to lift heavy weights or raise hell or have the hand grenade session. And I think that was a really good grounding for me as coaching. I would literally just see, like, is this client in the state to train? And then what we would do in the first 5 to 10 minutes of that session would be just change their state, like get them moving, get them mobile, get them in the zone, in the actual session. Sometimes that they might be physically there in their body, but their head was somewhere else. And I think that's so. Would you coin that as a nice guy skill? Like that was born out of being able to be seeing, oh right, okay, cool. There you go. I'm actually I'm loving this. So, how,
I just for a minute, Ben, if I could jump in and come back to something you were talking about, boundaries. I didn't have them either, but I want to make a distinction that I use, and that is boundaries or standards. I actually have very few boundaries in my life, but I have a ton of standards. How do I put that? I've heard before, I teach people how to treat me. And so I can raise or lower that standard depending upon the situation. I can come in really soft. I can come in really hard. Having a standard for communication, having a standard for how I'm treated. If somebody's having a bad day and they come in and they offload on me, one, I believe straight out of the gate, they can't carry it alone. They're asking me to do it covertly with them. I'm okay with that. I can then start raising our standard of communication and our interaction and see if they go with. If they don't, then I can set a boundary of, hey, not okay. We're either going to come up together in this conversation or I'm going to step out. I'm going to stop the conversation. So I think having a lot of standards for how we communicate with each other, how we interact physically with each other across the spectrum, I think having those standards is a good idea. But boundaries are this sort of front to back idea. Standards are razor lower. That feels a lot more approachable or doable for me versus a boundary. And I hear people get so upset. You crossed my boundary. It's like, I didn't even know it was there. There was no tell that that boundary was there. And I'm usually really good at telling boundaries. So secondly, I judge most people aren't very clear on what their boundaries are until somebody goes past them. But writing out standards to me is a lot easier than writing out boundaries.
I love that.
It's too further.
I love that distinction. That's like a really good one. I actually came up with a ladder of boundaries. I think I always try to work out, did I create this myself or did I read it somewhere? I'm pretty darn sure I created this myself. And it's like level 0 boundaries. You have no boundaries. You like I was, mid-20s, don't even know what they are, don't know that they exist. You never really heard them. That's like level 0. Level 1, you have boundaries, but you don't communicate them. And like, so people walk all over you and you just spend your whole time pissed off that people stepping over your boundary. Level 2, you have boundaries and you can communicate them, but you can't enforce them. So it's like that kind of, as soon as you get into, and especially going back to a recovering nice guy, is that having boundaries, okay, well, this is not okay, but then letting people off. And I think that's also to do with standards. Like, I think what the standard in my house growing up was you would get grounded if you misbehaved, but you could overthrow that grounding if you asked enough times. And that was kind of that was like, my mum would get so annoyed with especially me and my younger brother, if she grounded us for bad behavior, she couldn't enforce it. She struggled so much to enforce it with two, highly energetic young boys in the house. So interesting. What would you say is a main distinction between a standard and a boundary, though? Just so to really get, because that's such a good distinction.
Boundaries are really firm. Like, for instance, you won't belittle me. I will not tolerate it. We can have a really powerful discourse. You can not like my mustache and you can tell me all about it. I'm with you in that conversation. But the minute it gets more personal than that, you go after my personal self, you go after my relationship, you go after my wife, we're done now. I don't know. Is that very clear?
I think it is a really good distinction, because I think a boundary is, like, for me, is not letting someone else's shit become your shit. Like, not letting someone else's, really, like, that is, like, whether it's their mood, whether it's their views, whether it's their contractions, whether it's their disorganization. For me, a boundary is, I'm not going to let whatever is going on, it's going bad for you, become my problem, and me have to carry it involuntarily also. Whereas a standard is like, I'm actually just going to raise the consciousness at which we're communicating. That's what I'm hearing from what you said. Is like, and actually, even when you said that, I was like, actually that's pretty something me and Poppy do really well. Is we've continuously raised the standard at which we communicate when we're in conflict.
I agree. Just as an aside, being able to be the observer as well as the person in the conflict, incredibly powerful. So I know we're going to get into leadership here in a minute. And to me, that's one of the best forms of leadership I have in my life, is to be in the conversation and witnessing the conversation.
Tell us more about that, Troy. Go into that. You start, brother.
So I'll share an example. So my wife and I had a conflict, this is a couple of years ago now. And one of the most powerful we've probably had in years as far as conflicts go. And I remember in a moment, all of a sudden I was in conflict with her, but I was also like standing aside, observing the two of us. And I started to laugh. It was so ridiculous what we were arguing over, really. And to be able to be that sort of observer in the moment felt really surreal and really helpful, really powerful, because it's like, I don't have to be in this anymore. And I can actually step outside of myself and just witness the bullshit. We weren't actually meeting each other's needs, which was the ask in that moment. She was not feeling heard. I was feeling locked down. I, in that moment, could then step outside, give her what she needed, not what helped me to feel safe. You'll hear that a lot from me. When I meet most anyone, so in that moment, again, my wife didn't feel safe. I don't have to feel safe as part of leadership and knowing myself, self-leadership. I know I'm safe in the moment, 98% of the time. I would say too, in working with women, especially our partners, one day my wife shared with me that in broad daylight, she may not feel safe walking across a parking lot in an area that's actually very safe. So creating safety for our partners, our female partners, is really powerful.
Yeah.
I'll get my needs met later.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Even like when you just talk about environmental safety, and like I've noticed that like when we've travelled, Poppy and I took the kids to South Africa. I was actually telling this story to someone, I think even last night. We stepped off the plane in South Africa, and there was like this horde of guys who came over to take the bags, and it was very, very hot, and there was so much going on. I remember her just being so reactive, and I remember it was actually quite a great moment for me, because I'd realised how much work I'd done. Is like she dropped into super reactive, very unsafe, very worried, and that was my opportunity to lead and be like, we've got this, everything, we're going to be okay, be very level-headed, be very present with my body and my bodily reactions to the circumstance. And I remember like she was really freaking out because she was like, I really don't feel safe, I can't find where we need to go. And I think for that leadership, it paid massive dividends in our relationship. I remember her saying to us like, oh yeah, I'm really glad you were taking control and taking charge then, because she really appreciated that. And I've noticed that's, if I ever make mistakes in my relationship, it's when I'm not leading, when things like that happen. She really appreciates that from me. So I think that for you, like you said there, when there's an environmental stress and say your partner drops into reactivity, if you can lead and be level-headed and pragmatic in that moment, it counts for so much.
I agree. Something I've never heard talked about is I judge that nice guy behavior very much is in tune with feminine energy. So if I think about not stepping into a conversation, being able to read a room, a lot of that is feminine qualities that we have. And it's interesting that women like to have sex with bad boys, but they like to get married to nice guys.
Yeah.
They feel safer with us. And I judge in part it's because we've walked some of their road. We understand them better.
Do you think that the work then for a lot of guys is to understand when to use different levels of energy, like when the strong masculine needs to show up and when the calm, welcoming, soothing feminine needs to show up as well. Is that what you preach, Troy? Is like this real? Well, I think actually, to be fair to Glover, that's what he talks about, is like integration nation. Is his tribe that he's created. It's like an integrated man is the man that can use both. It's not, he hasn't just got a hyped up masculine and wounded feminine. He's actually got higher levels of both. Is that what you're alluding to here?
Yes, being able to utilize either or both. I see this huge call across the social media landscape to be alpha. There's this emphasis on alpha, and I think that's great, except it's all in the masculine. Where do we really relate to the women in our life? Where do we relate to our children? What are we modeling for them? If it's all alpha, alphas aren't approachable. If we really want to talk about a wolf pack, they're not approachable. I want to use them masculine, feminine, and in a balance in any moment.
Yeah, I think that's been my road to integration. Like, honestly, I think that when I started men's work when I was 30, I was probably about 30, like properly saying, oh, this is men's work, I'm doing men's work. Before that, I'd done a lot of coaching, I'd done a lot of like retreats and stuff like that. It was just general personal development. And what I found with men's work is I had no idea about these terms or what was going on for me, what some of the struggles and challenges I had in my life. And for me, it was coming back to this idea of, I needed to be more masculine. I actually needed to be more masculine because I was very feminine. I brought up by my mother, father wounds, didn't want to be like my dad. And actually, one of the things that massively healed me was in like when I started therapy, and I realized how much I actually loved my dad, how much I really wanted to be more masculine like my dad and have my dad's traits. And that was a big shift for me. And I think so many men especially have been brought up in a female like led household. It could be the female is the caregiver, the main caregiver, because of the absent father. He can be physically absent. It could be his attention can be not there. He might be gone because he's not in the house. But it's been a female led household. So they've been brought up by a woman, and they've got so much shadow masculinity. That is why they struggle to lead in their lives. It's like, I think there's like that for me was the epidemic when I first discovered it. When I first started men's work, we started Awaken Man. I was like, oh my gosh, so many men in the group were brought up by the men, and they struggle with so many things around masculinity, and they struggle to lead. And guess what? There was so many women I was working with, and they were overly masculine. And I was like, why? I was just trying to make sense of so much of it. So, what's your take on that, Troy? Because I think you obviously, in the time you've been coaching, you've experienced that as well. And I'd be specifically interested in how you think that impacts a man in his leadership, in relationship, or in work.
I think sometimes it's easier to practice leadership outside of ourselves than in. Even if in means setting a wake time, getting my ass to meditation and then to the gym, whatever that might look like. Sometimes being in leadership with my partner can actually feel easier. And to be able to do that requires being able to be in conversation, like we talked about earlier. I wonder sometimes if being able to be in leadership of ourself really isn't about taking the time to actually get to know ourselves. We don't do that too much, especially today. We've got way too much social media distracting us. And so I just lost my train of thought, in part because as you were sharing, my mind's kind of following this winding road, and it diverged a few times. And I appreciate what you were sharing.
Yeah.
Because, go ahead.
It was I think one of the things that I think that a lot of men have lost is that ability to lead, and they've lost it because they've been brought up by their mother, and I'm not blaming women here. I'm saying that so many men now are on the back end of this epidemic, which is absent fathers who have been either physically, emotionally, or attentionally absent. And then it comes to where we are here and now in 2024, and we've got this epidemic of absent men, and in positions of leadership, in positions in the home, in relationship, where they're struggling. And what I was asking was, what do you think, what's your take on that, and what's your experience of seeing that from guys who are coming into coaching, maybe women that have sent their guys into coaching, or women that you've coached? What are you seeing in this at the moment? Because I'm seeing this quite a lot, and I think it's a huge part of the struggles people have with leadership.
I wonder if nice guy stuff has always been this prevalent, or if this is kind of new in the last few generations. I'm guessing it's kind of new because we used to work with our fathers. They were around whether we wanted them to be or not. Now they're not around. I see a lot of pushing off responsibility of leadership onto someone else. I see a lot of nice guys doing that, men in general, doing that with their partners. When she changes, then I'll level up. I see that a lot. And yet, if I think about a scale, you only have to weight one side, weight or unweight, to balance it. Both sides don't have to, meaning she doesn't have to come up. We can just go first. In fact, that's one of the tenets and rules for my life, is if I want something, I have to go first. I have to go get it.
That's so good.
And I want to be a leader. It's a craving for me. And I think, Ben, you and I are probably the same. Part of why leadership is so important to me is because I didn't fucking have it. I didn't have it from my father, as well-intentioned as he was. He was not a leader. My mother was. And she was because he didn't. Someone had to lead our family. He couldn't. He didn't know how. I do not blame him or judge him for that. His father was absent. And so I'm going to blame him for something I'm not capable of as an adult man? Whoa. Yeah. Nope.
I agree. Oh my gosh, this is really insightful for me, Troy. I agree. I don't think either of my parents. My mum was the reluctant leader, so she was in a position of leadership because she was a single mum, 3 kids, a failed marriage, a guy that was really, my brother's dad, he was quite aggressive and quite volatile out of the military. He left. Never violent, but just aggressive. But yeah, there was so much turbulence in my household. My mum was the reluctant leader, and my dad was he could have been a great leader, but he just never got the chance because he was not in the home. I definitely reckon that I had my mother's story about my dad, so I had no leadership. And what you just said there is sometimes it's why am I so obsessed with this topic? And I think I've just landed right now. So thank you, man. I appreciate this conversation already.
That which I didn't have is what I value most. It's what I crave most.
Yeah.
I now crave male attention, to put it bluntly. I want friends around, male friends. Until I was in my mid-30s, almost all of my friends were women. Because I trusted them. And one morning I woke up at about 34 years old and went, I just really don't freaking trust men. And this may sound obvious to most men, and yet all of a sudden I realized then, shit, I'm a man. If I don't trust them, I don't trust me. Okay, stop. This has to change. Where do we start? What do I need to do? And I did. I started. 33, I had a gnarly breakup. I decided I was going to go a year, no dating, no hooking up, nothing with women. And then 2 years in, I met my wife. So I got to year 1, it's nope, not ready, not done yet.
That's
but I had to find a way to break the pattern.
Yeah, just slow down a second, because I think that is like so important. Like you mentioned before, you don't think that a lot of people know themselves. And like, I reckon that was a big thing for me, because I would go from relationship to a relationship to a relationship. And then you actually don't realize who you are. You don't know like who you are if you're not trying to please someone, or what's the word for it? Like, compromise yourself. And like, who am I if I'm not in a relationship? And there was a big part of my life between different relationships. Like, I really need just to have time apart from women. And what was your experience of that 2 years? Like, if you could tell a bit more, that'd be great.
I did the same. I had the same relationship with a different person over and over and over. It sounds like just like you. And I don't know how old this movie is now, but I imagine it's at least 20. And there was a movie with Julia Roberts years ago called Runaway Bride.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen it.
There were times prior to being 33, 34, 5, where most of the movies, when I watched them, I actually related to the women in the movies, because that was, again, my experience was working to be safe, not wanting conflict, not feeling safe in conflict. So I'm watching this movie, and she goes from husband to husband, or would-be husband, and she doesn't know how she likes her eggs. She likes her eggs however her partner at the moment likes her eggs. It's a metaphor for not knowing herself. She never took the time to be alone long enough and to test some things to find out how she liked her damn eggs. It was silly in the movie, and yet it's one of those moments in my life where it was like, I don't know how I like my eggs. I don't know how I like anything. I know I keep showing up as the worst version of myself when it comes to conflict in my relationships. I know that I shut them down and punish them by not talking to them for days or weeks on end because they crossed a boundary that I hadn't established. I just knew it felt bad, and I knew I was afraid to speak up, because then for sure they would take away love. And if I was the one retreating, they were the one pursuing. And they pursued often until I exhausted them. The role was reversed. One of the things that I said to you when we started our call was, I'm seeing again this movement too about how men attract, we don't pursue. And I'm thinking, everything in my biology says I pursue, whether that's a mate, food, I'm hunting or chasing it, or status. I'm not attracting status, I'm pursuing it. I'm not attracting a mate. Maybe that's a part of it in being ready and physically taking care of myself, emotionally, mentally prepared. But I'm pursuing. I believe we're designed, I believe our physicality is a metaphor for who we are as a total, and that is to penetrate. It's easy to penetrate our partners, our women, with our bodies. It's much harder mentally and emotionally. But I think our body is a metaphor for pursuing, for penetrating, breaking through, putting it better.
Yeah, I think there's something that me and Pete covered on a podcast about potency, and I think that's like something that I really, when I heard that word, I was like, oh, like a man needs potency to penetrate the woman, like his women, and all his partners and the world. And I was like, right, yeah, that was really resonated. And I realized like how many men struggle with potency because they don't have the physiological conditions to help them be potent. They don't have the psychological conditions to help them be potent in their actions. And that's why men struggle to be the guy that, you know, the penetrative guy who pushes through his challenges, the struggles, the relationship matters that he has to push through. And I was like, right, it made a lot of sense. And actually that's what, when you look at it, is in how you said it there, breaking through. That's what often we're trying to do is, as people pursuing success or creating success, is we're trying to break through a terminal velocity we reach. We get to a certain, like I'm at one at the moment. I'm just on the cusp of a breakthrough, and I can feel that I need to be in my best like state every single day to make that breakthrough, because I need to keep showing up every single day in that position to break through. And yeah, that's a really, really good point. You were talking just a little bit about conflict, and like I think that in terms of leadership, I think that one of the most important things I've learned personally to not only just get better with in my own life, but to teach and to watch clients have much better conflict. How high up the leaderometer would you place the ability to navigate and have good conflict as a leader?
Imperative. One of the highest. It's certainly a highest value. And I think part of why I started coaching was I recognized it was a place I could step inside and practice conflict. Because I'm going to toe to toe with men at times. I have to call them in on their shit, not out. That's shaming. I'm calling them into the conversation, into their work. Being able to do that is absolutely key. It's fundamental.
And how did you get better at this? Because I can share my experience, but like, how did you get to the point where you realized, like, were you not very good at this when you first realized this was just like, oh my gosh, I really need to work on this, and then you went about, like, can you tell us about that, Troy?
I was so bad at conflict. Like I said, I either shut people down or I cut them out. I have cleaved way too many relationships out of my life because of my behavior, because of not being willing to have conflict. And I realized that I was going to die alone. If I did not figure out how to do better and be better, this was not going to go well for me.
Wow. Yeah. I think that for me, I think it was more my first marriage. We used to tell everyone how great the marriage was because we didn't have any conflict. And then we had one, I was like, oh yeah, we never argue, we get on great. And then we had one argument and it was over. And I laugh and even with a smile on my face, joke a little bit, but there was a real sadness about that as well. It was like really sad because and I think that's what happens with so many people is that they pride themselves on, we don't ever have an argument, because one of the biggest things that they fear conflict so much. And then I remember my relationship with Poppy, and like when we first started, I was like, there was way more things that pissed me off, and it was way more volatile because of the difference in our personalities. And I realized that even though I'd learned so much about conflict in the workplace in my 20s, I'd never had it in my home. I'd never really had it in a relational landscape. And I've got to say, I've had more conflict with Poppy than I've had in any other relationship in my life. But I trust her so much more. I feel so much more safe, so much more solid. And that's because I've got someone who's willing to go deeper as a result of conflict instead of pushing away. Like, and this is something we even wrote it into our wedding vows, is like in moments where we would normally push away, we'll push towards. And this has been transformational for me. It's like I feel so much better in my current relationship because we have conflict and because we resolve it and because we're getting faster at resolving it and more effective than I have in any other relationship in my life.
I love that. And it affirms what I've been witnessing for many years. I judge couples fight because it's the most connected they can feel.
Oof. You'll have to elaborate on that.
Outside of, so I'm going to get personal, but this is what I do. Outside of sex with Poppy, when do you feel more connected to her than when you are in conflict or struggle with her?
Outside of sex.
No, but let me ask this for clarity. Is there anyone else in the world in that moment? Is there any other focus? Do you care about anything else that's going on other than being in conversation with Poppy and getting it resolved?
That's a really, really good insight. That's such a good insight. I never would have looked at it like that. That's so right. Yeah, you're right. When we are fighting, let me just make sure I coin the term fighting. When we're having conflict, yeah, we do not have physical violence in our house. It's just like, I am consumed by only resolving that thing. Actually, like, this is something I think that's really difficult, and at the same time, I'm very, like, being in a conflict and trying to maintain normal function was something I never could have done originally. Now I can still coach, I can still move, do things in my business, but primarily most of my emotional and mental bandwidth goes towards Poppy in a conflict, right?
That's right. So you and Poppy have learned how to do this in a healthy way, a certainly healthier way. Most couples out there, and part of the reason why we see the divorce rate where it is they get into this pattern of loving the connection with each other of when they're fighting, because nothing else exists. It's incredibly exhilarating. It feels wonderful to be that connected. So one of the things I work to do is I help people learn how to fight nice. Still bring that energy, but be able to be in the conversation, not of the conversation. Or put a different way, I teach men specifically how to be in process, not on outcome. I'm not looking to make her wrong. I'm not looking to be right. I'm looking for resolution, which I know is going to go beyond this conversation. There will be more. So being in process, not on outcome.
Yeah, because I think that my experience of this was that one of the struggles I was having with Poppy, and this is, if you're listening to this, you might be experiencing the same. I actually got a coach to work specifically on this. I was like, right, I'm going to go and work on this thing specifically, is that we would have a fight, we'd have conflict, it would rise up, she would get sad, she would get mad, she would withdraw, I'd want to resolve it, I'd push for continued conversation, we would have some time apart, we'd maybe go to sleep, we'd wake up in the morning, and there would be some apologies, but there would be no resolution. We'd never get to resolution. And I remember my coach at the time saying, he said, Ben, that's a model for, it's a model for conflict, but it's not a model for long-term peace. He said, you're never going to get to peace. And the whole point of conflict is to get to the other side, to get the wisdom, to get through it. And I remember hearing that, I was like, so fucking helpful. It's just like, I can see it, I was getting 80% through the conversation, the conflict, but we just weren't getting to the wisdom and the resolution. And that's why I was at the time really worried about getting married. I was like, I can't have this model of conflict. So I worked on it for about 6 to 8 months. And in that 6 to 8 months, we had more fights than we had peace. We had a lot of fights, but our relationship got 10 times stronger. Go figure. It was like, and really interesting, because I think I go back to leaders, go back to the context of leaders, especially. So many leaders will do whatever it takes to avoid hard conversations with people and conflict, especially.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's always the case, and yet some of my experience in observing men for a long time, thousands of them, is a lot of our women know or feel that if we fight with them, we'll fight for them. Meaning, put a different way, I know men who will not fight. I know men who won't allow themselves to get angry. And so I can imagine that their women are like, if you're not going to spar with me, how do you spar out there in the world? How do you get between me and somebody who's threatening me?
So yeah, I think it's such a good observation. Have you had women say that to you, or is that just an observation, Troy, or men say that to you?
I've had women say that to me, especially in couples work.
And so what would they say? Would they be like, I just don't feel like he's got that oomph, he's lost his gusto, or he feels like he's got no fight in him?
No fight, no courage, no heart. And a lot of times those relationships don't last very long, because if we don't have a well-established emotional range, we're not going to do well in a relationship, because well, I don't know about your woman, but my woman has a wonderful emotional range.
I've got a good. We both got a good emotional range. We can go through all the seasons.
Yes. And I think that's incredibly powerful because it means you know yourself. I mean, my wife, Julie, amazing. Her ability to stay calm, her ability to stay in conversation and conflict, second to none.
Wow, you're lucky, man.
She has been a huge teacher for me. Her work has taught her in part how to do that. Some of it's how she came, wired that way. And yet I love that she teaches me that I can be both safe and brave at the same time.
Yeah. What's the background, Troy?
She's worked in hospitality for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. She's often said, how is it people can come on vacation and be in such a horrible mood?
Yeah. It's just, yeah. Because I think that is something that I really struggled with, was like when I got angry, one of the things that I would worry about is like, I'm going to fuck something up here. I'm going to break something. Like that was one of my biggest, I think this is like the biggest thing I've noticed more recently is I trust myself way more in a heightened state especially relationship conflict now. Like I can be very, very hurt, sad, mad, afraid when Poppy and I are arguing, but I'm very, very pragmatic and slow, or slower than I was before. Probably still not transcended. I don't think I'll ever transcend those kind of heightened emotions, but I definitely think that when you've got a partner who is also conscious enough to be like your partner is, Troy, I think that's a gift, because like there's so few people that get that in conflict, isn't it? Where they just haven't got someone who's solid, slow, practical when there is conflict going on.
I just realized something. I think my wife and I are both good at, her better than I, is she doesn't pile on when I'm having a difficult time. And I see a lot of couples doing that, just in people in the world. If someone's having a difficult time, they tend to pile on with their own shit. It's like, that person's already having a difficult time. I don't need to add to it. And my wife is really good about it letting my shit be my shit. She doesn't add her stuff to it.
Speak some more to this, because I think that is actually a really good leadership trait, isn't it? Like to be able to see somebody in your team who's already struggling, already having a hard time. Yeah, they're not reaching the standards by which that are set in the company, but then piling on a load of unmet expectation and shame, it's not going to help that person perform. And I've definitely experienced leadership like that. So if you could speak a bit more to that, that'd be really helpful, Troy.
That's beautiful. Appreciate that. The difference between why and what. If somebody's in my team is having a hard time and I say, why can't you perform better? Why aren't you meeting these goals? Versus what is in your way? What can I do, or what can someone on our team do, or what do you need right now? We go from shame to support. Why questions seem to be shaming to me. Accusative, if nothing else. Whereas what questions are open, they're curious. I can still be angry and launch a what question. May not land as well, but it's going to land better than a why question.
I think
it also helps me regulate my emotions, my nervous system, to be able to, when I'm in frustration, because frustration is one of my most difficult emotions to manage. One, it's so close to anger that the step over into anger is easy. So I've had to learn how to manage my frustration. Still a work in progress, and I'm sure I will be till the day I die. But maturity is all about recognizing I want to be better in this area, and I'm going to go focus there.
Yeah, I think, I actually think, especially for men, like, and women, I don't think this is just for men, but I think mainly my experiences with men with this is that one of the reasons men struggle to lead is that they don't have a safe relationship with their own anger. And as soon as, like you said, like the emotionometer just boils up towards anger, there is so much shame, there is so much bad things associated with anger. It causes this like spiral of thought, state, leadership. Everything goes out the window because there's so much worry and concern because it's not safe. And that for me was the work that I initially had to do going into men's work. I would pacify my team. I would be the nice guy. I was raging inside. I was hurting so much because I was so afraid of losing my temper. And it wasn't until one day, actually, I actually didn't lose my temper. I lost my shit with my team because there was just so many things that weren't being done in the business. And I can remember my whole body shaking. Like I literally had to, I was so angry. I had to like take about half an hour just to stop shaking over something really trivial. And I'm like, I need to sort this. This is like really not good. And that's where, especially with men's work, where anger release work, the men's retreat I went on, which is a phenomenal men's retreat, did an exercise where you actually embodied all of your anger. And getting better at dealing with that and bringing it to the surface was like, it was almost like I gave my stress bucket like 10 times the capacity. So I think it's a really good point you made, is that so many men, but so many leaders fear what it's like to just boil over into anger.
I had said a little bit ago that people, when they are behaving badly, very often are asking us to carry the load with them. They can't do it alone. One of the things that I look for is language. So I'm working on a book at the moment, and the working title at this time is Words Fucking Matter. Because they help shape my state. They help shape my sense of well-being. And if I can work with my language so that I'm stepping into a place of courage and leadership, and ask someone on my team to support me in that moment, to out myself and say, I'm going to lose my shit. Can you talk to me for a minute? Can you help me work through this? I'm stuck in my mind. We don't do that. As leaders, a lot of time it's like they expect me to be able to do this. Bullshit story or not, right? They don't actually. And they'd much rather us be human and show our flaws, show our emotional range by not having to go all the way to anger before we ask for help.
Yeah. So Troy, do you think that it is helpful for a guy or lady to say out loud in front of their team if they're angry or frustrated or pissed off, like that I need 5 minutes, I'm really angry right now? Do you think that's is it a helpful thing? Do you think it should be used? What's your opinion on this?
I do. And the reason for that is I have to remember that not everybody has my skill in being able to read a room, or me. So if I tell them, hey, I'm going to take a pulse for 5 minutes. I'm feeling really angry right now, really pissed off. They now can go, I thought he was pissed off, right? I thought he was angry. Oh, wait, I thought he was just overwhelmed. Yeah. Now they're getting to know what my cues are. They can read me better if I'm being what I believe is honest with them. I'll throw in a little caveat though. I have seen people, especially men, go into overwhelm and mistake it for anger. Overwhelm and sadness are a lot alike. We can spend some time there, but eventually our nervous systems and us will get sick of being there. And so we just flash into anger. I'm tired of feeling like I can't make any movement when I'm sad. I feel like I just want to be in a corner back there. But I can go to anger and I know how to motivate myself.
Yeah.
It's just not a very healthy way of motivating myself.
Have you ever seen the Brené Brown diagram where she said, and it's like it came from Atlas of the Heart, and it says behind this may be this. Have you seen it? It like
Yes.
Behind, and it's got. And for those of you listening to the podcast, just type in Brené Brown anger diagram into Google, and it's probably one of those profound things that we would show men, like, you know, especially when I was working with men, I'd show men as like, behind this is this. And it was, you'd watch men like see this diagram and just soften, like, oh, I'm not just pissed off all the time. I'm actually hurt or in shame or embarrassed or humiliated. And I realized that, like, I spent 2-3 years with a clenched jaw, raging at the world, thinking I had anger issues. I didn't. I had so many other things going on behind that. But it's just the way that I showed up was thinking that I was angry, and I wasn't. I was just hurt. I was really hurt. And yeah, it was really profound for me. That diagram explained so much to me about me. And it was so helpful. You know, I remember even telling my therapist at the time, Tim, I was like, and I explained about about my divorce and and he goes, it doesn't sound like anger. And he goes, anyway, you're not great at expressing anger. And I was like, okay, cheers. But he said, it sounds like humiliation. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it was humiliation. And it just, like you said before, having the words to express that and clarify that was just so helpful for me. I was like, yeah, I just felt really humiliated. And I think that, like you said before, name it to tame it. When you've got the words, it made it so much easier to process.
To anybody who's listening, if you do not have an emotion wheel available to you all the time, sitting on your desk, on your refrigerator, you can't really know your emotions because you can't name them. I remember the first time I looked through a really extensive emotion wheel and thinking, I know the word, but I'm not sure I've ever like clearly felt that emotion. I bet I have, but I couldn't name it. Let alone, I think if I'm feeling humiliated, I'm going to go to anger so that you don't see it and I don't feel it. Right? I'm much more comfortable with anger than humiliation.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys are. I think that's where, and I think that's why so many men need a coach. They need a group of men. They need a coach. They need great men around them to show them that path. Like, I think that I didn't realize because, you know, look at my dad, and I'd say this to his face, you know, he just wasn't great with anger. Like, he wasn't great with anger. And a lot of the time, I look back now, he was hurting. He was so hurt. He was so let down. There's so many things in his life that he didn't deserve. And he struggled with them. And like, I never had good modeling for dealing with anger from anyone until I found mentors and coaches.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. And yet again, brother, it's why I crave it so much. I teach that which I need to learn. And so that's why I help men with relationships. I want to do better. That's why I work with men around relationships, because I want to do better. And I just have to stay this much in front of them, just a little bit in front of them.
Yeah. So there's one thing that you shared when we first met, Troy, and it was just a little bit about, it was about your work in suicide. And I just wanted to like ask about that, because I think that it was really interesting. This is more for self-indulgence than anything. Just like, if you just share some of the things that you've experienced and some of the lessons that you've had from working in that field, I think it'd just be valuable. Because I think, like you said, we were going to do this podcast on that, but I think that something you said was, I wish more people would intervene. If you could just take it from there and just share a little bit about your work, that would be so helpful.
I'd love to. Thank you for the offer and opportunity. I brought some of it in to our call already, and that is, people are asking me to help them carry their shit. Men notoriously are not good at asking for help, let alone help with things that they don't want in their life to begin with. Yesterday, I was reading some statistics over brunch, just light reading, typical of me, around suicide and the statistics around it, especially here in the US, where suicide in men is incredibly high. One of the studies I read states that a man in the US dies by his own hand every 17 minutes. That's intolerable to me. We have to create an environment where men can actually speak to and trust each other. And if I want something, I have to go first. It's why I coach. It's why I'm out in the world working with teen boys. It's why I created a men's community online, groupsformen.com, is men have to have a diverse place to go to be able to find tribe. We need other men, even if it's just one. I know I saw recently there's a group of military folks who every 22nd of the month, they call a friend to check on them once a month, to check in. But when we look at I think it's Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men, he talks about the fact that 14% of men don't have a friend. I think it's the next 24%. Their only friend is their partner. Nearly half of men don't have a friend. How do we talk about our partner with our partner?
Such a scary fact. Like, that is so sad. It's so sad. Like, that is not, it's not sad. I'm not saying those men are sad. I'm saying it is a sad situation to be in a state where you've lost your friends. Like, you've lost your people. Like, that must be so difficult.
Yes, and our behavior. That's one of the things that I see. If I don't have men in my life that I trust, no one is there to check my behavior, both what they're hearing from me and what they see me exhibit out to the world. We would have had men around us in tribe prior to a couple of 100 years ago who would have kept us in check. If we were out of line, they would have said, whoa, hey, slow down. Bring it back in. We don't have that anymore. We also need men. It's one of the reasons why I love the groups that I lead, is because men will come together and check in and say, first call, I don't have any friends. I don't know how to make friends. I don't know my emotional capacity. Pretty much I just stay sad or angry. And for other men in the room to go, yeah, me too. It's been a bit co-opted, I think, now, but I think those are the two most powerful words in the English language, is me too.
Yeah, I get it. Well, actually, like, this is something that, like, I surprised a couple of my mates back home when I went back home and I said, listen, I've been trying to make friends. I mean, and it was like, I said, as weird as this sounds, because they know what I'm like. I can meet someone on the left and make really close friends really quickly. I'm very, very, but I've really struggled for deep connection. I've had like hi bye, I call hi bye friends, like hi bye, like hi, how you doing? Bye. It's like very like in the gym you can have hi bye friends. Whereas I think that meaningful deep connections, like I really struggled when I got to Dubai with that. I think that was something that I found it really difficult, especially having been in a place. But then if I'm honest, I had loads of friends in my gym community. They were clients. And they weren't my friends, they were clients. And like, as soon as they struggled or they didn't want to pay their membership, for any reason, not like, because of financial reasons, or they're just bored, they would leave the gym and they weren't as close as I first thought. We just had frequency, we didn't have depth.
Right. Yeah, mile deep. Okay, now I'm starting to get a sense of where that comes from for you.
Yeah. Like I love the deep conversation. I can go on this sort of stuff, and I think this is like coming back to the conversation we'll be having, is that I think that so many men don't get the depth that they need in their conversations.
I think it's a huge reason why men choose to leave. Life is so unfulfilling without a brotherhood, or a brother. Doesn't even have to be a group. Just one guy. I think that was my dad, honestly. He had men he went hunting with, and a few he went fishing with, and I have no idea what they talked about. But I doubt it's anything like we've done just even here in the last hour, right? And so, struggling in his relationship with my mom, I judge it was very unfulfilling for both of them. I believe that he didn't know how to reach for a different life. And so when it came time to get close to retirement, and he was of a generation where what you did with your hands is how you had your value. It's how you had your place in the world. And so to stop doing that, no value, no place in the world. And I think when cancer showed up for my dad, he went, okay, cool. That's my belief. And I think a big part of him realized, okay, I can get off this rock. I've coined it passive suicide. And I think a lot of men do it, whether it's drugs, food is a big one. We eat ourselves to death. We drink ourselves to death. We ignore our health, whether that's going in for checkups, getting our skin checked for melanoma, whatever. We're asking for trouble in a way. And I have had conversations with so many men who aren't nihilistic, who aren't suicidal, who have a relationship with sadness but don't appear to go there all the time, who will tell me in confidence, yeah, I'm driving down the road and I realized in just a moment, what if I didn't make that corner doing 60 miles an hour? What if the plane I'm on just happened to crash? It'd be okay with me. Those moments of low moment. And I think if we don't have them addressed, if we don't get to talk about them, I think that thinking becomes chronic. And my spiritual belief is the universe will meet us with whatever we ask for. I believe my dad was asking for something different. He just didn't know what it was. Well, the universe speaks to us in 4 ways. It whispers, it talks, it yells, and then it clubs me with something. And my dad got clubbed. And 4 months later, he was gone because there was no fight left in him. To use the word you used earlier, there was no potency left. There was no ability to penetrate anymore and no desire to pursue. The problem is that's happening to men at a lot younger age than their 50s or 60s. I see it happening to men like you of, it's just not worth it. The fight's not worth it. I'm not quite sure how we bring a large group back in. I try to bring them in one by one back into their own life to want it, because we have to want our life. We have to pursue our life. One of the things I love about the videos of you out running is this idea, wow, fuck, he's actually chasing his life, right? You're after something, Ben. Yeah. And I don't judge it's just health, and I judge it's not just making a video for us. It's you chasing your life and getting to inspire us, connect with us by doing what you're wanting to achieve, to do. Is that
I am
right?
fighting for my life, definitely with the heat. I came in the other day. I just finished on a Sunday morning, and I was laid back. There was a conflict there, and I had to apologize sincerely to Poppy because I was way later than I prescribed I would be, because I was out, and I was about 4 or 5 miles from home, and I was just so hot. But tell you what, and it's funny because I feel so freaking alive. I'm in so much pain. I feel like I'm gonna die, but I really feel alive. I feel very, very invigorated, and it's like been a bit of a therapy for me, going out into the desert and just being on I haven't got any AirPods at the moment either, so I'm literally alone with my thoughts. So that's even better solitude. But it's been a real life. I really agree with you. I actually I'm delivering a workshop on Sunday, and I studied Maslow's work for the last 2-3 years under Yassine, and Yassine was very, very big on Maslow's work, and he talked a lot about Maslow, and I really did absorb a lot of what he shared. And one of the biggest things he said, Brian Johnson says the same thing, which is what one can be, one must be. What one can be, one must be. You absolutely have to actualize your known or even your unknown potential in order to have a happy life. And that has just stuck with me so much. It's if I'm ever feeling sad, or I'm anxious, or dropping into suicidal ideation, or anything that's like contracted about my thinking, I know it's because I'm not showing up in one of the areas of my life like I can do. And that's just helped me so much. Like that, as a leader, as a helped me, as a father, it's helped me, as a partner. Is that there's always gaps I can close, and that's where I think that I'm very psychologically well because of that thought I have. I'm like, okay, well, I'm feeling like, oh, there's so much responsibility, there's so much weight of pressure, and I'm like, yep, because there's a gap I need to close. And I think that's really helped me stay strong in moments of struggle, especially in the desert when it's 35 degrees and you've got no more water left.
So I guess the question then I have to ask, Ben, is knowing that there are men listening to this who will go, yeah, Ben, that's you. Look at you go, right? But if they're in a low state, if you were in a low state, Ben, how do you rise? Like, do you ask yourself questions? How do you get past that hump of what I can achieve, I must achieve? That liminal space, how do you close that gap for you?
Yeah, well, this is a really good question because it's like, go back to the kind of conscious competence, unconscious competence thing. I've never had anything different. I've never known anything different other than to get out of bed in the morning and go and do some exercise. I don't think there's been a time period in my life where I've not trained. So it's actually a very difficult question for me to answer. I just think that every single day there is no thinking, there's no negotiation. I'm going out, there's something I'm doing no matter what it is. There is no condition that I have to meet. It's just, if it is today, I'm going out and I'm training. So it's almost like like you said before, a standard that I've got that I retain. So there will never be a period in my life of which I don't wake up in the morning and I go out and do something. And so I think that's such a big box to tick when it comes to your own wellness. It's not a do I or don't I train? Do I or do I not go outside? It's like there is no question around it. It just happens. And I get that from my mum. My mum is exactly the same. No, right? There's no such thing as bad weather. There's just the wrong clothes, and that's how it's always been. So I don't think I will ever touching wood. I don't think I will struggle as much as some people do because I've got that relationship with my body. So I'm not, and this is not me bragging or something, but if a man's listening to this or anyone's listening to this and you're struggling psychologically, I think that one of the things you've got to remove is a condition around exercise and training. It's a non-negotiable. It happens every single day. Like this is I wake up in the morning and I do the training to have exercise. And that's the way I see it. I've never got back from a training session gone, I've got less energy than when I went out the door. So yeah, good question, Troy. Like, really good question, because it's something that you get what I mean. Is when you're consciously, unconsciously competent at something, you're like, oh, well, I just do it. I don't know, but yeah, picking that apart is probably because it's been unconditional.
So yes, and for instance, last December, I had an injury. I was working in my garage. I was on the top of a 2-meter high ladder, 6-foot ladder. And I had a friend helping me. And what I handed down to him, he twisted and he knocked me off the top of the ladder and I fell. My chest was at about 10 feet, a little over 3 meters, onto a concrete floor. I dislocated the shoulder. I injured my right hip pretty significantly and I cracked 3 of my left ribs. It didn't matter how much physical movement I wanted to do. I couldn't. I did what I could, but I couldn't. And I found it was difficult to get back on that horse, so to speak, after that injury. So I went through a couple of questions. So instead of a pros and cons list of why exercise, why not exercise, what do I get out of not exercising? What do I get out of exercising? And I would go through several iterations of questions to try and get clear about what's my block. Why don't I want to? Why can't I? Once I know why I can't or won't, now I can actually find those pieces. But I think for most of us to just say we'll push through, it can work for a little while. But the minute I travel and change my schedule, forget it. I'm not doing it. And the physical part's actually the easy part. Some of the harder things for me is my meditation practice or my journaling. There are other people in the hotel room with me. I don't have any quiet time. I'm just not going to meditate today. Instead of, guys, I'll be back in 30 minutes, I'm going to go find a bench somewhere quiet, a stairwell. Doesn't matter. You said it. It basically has to be a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
How do we make that, though? How do we create that? One is enough days in a row to where it's just in our bones, right? You've done this for so long. It's in your bones now. You'd feel like crap if you didn't do it. And yet I'm guessing there are places outside of physicality where what you can do, you must do. There's a gap.
Yeah.
Meaning, I'm sure there are areas you haven't arrived at yet.
I am. I think this is a really interesting like predicament for so many people. Is like I'm always looking for better. Is so that I maybe sometimes it's even too soft on myself. But if I did it once last quarter, and I wanted to do it more, if I do it twice in this quarter, it's still better. And it's like playing the long game. I think so many people want to go from first to fifth gear so quickly. So I think some of these habits have been built up over years of just getting better and better. Where I've just finished a program where you keep a journal twice a day. I didn't keep a journal that frequently ever. I've never kept a journal that frequently. And how often have I done that? Probably about 70% of the time over the course of the program. So I've probably gone from keeping a journal like 10% of the time to like 10% of the month to 70. That's a big improvement for me. I'm really that is phenomenal. I'm really, really happy with that. And what I mean by that is just that you've done the journal in the morning and the evening. Like I've pretty much done the journal every evening, but it's just the morning sometimes I've missed because I've been straight into action. And I think so many people from a perfectionist mindset think that it has to go from 0 to 100. And I think it cripples perfection. It cripples progress from perfection. I'm very good at going through the gears. Like this journaling program, I've done it 70% this time. Okay, I'm starting a new 12 weeks. If it improves to go 75 to 80, I'm really happy about that. And I don't think enough people give themselves that slack. I think they just have such tight margins for success.
I want to come back to nice guy stuff for a minute. I'm realizing as you and I are talking, wow, so much of this is really about self-care, self-respect and self-care. And I see so many men who will care for others to the death, but they will not care for themselves. They won't allow themselves that love, compassion, again, self-respect, to say, it's good for me. It's okay that I exercise. It's okay that I journal. I'm going to let the judgment go that that's a girly thing to do. Right? Being able to find our own morning routine, being able to find our own evening routine. But again, I come back to self-care. Not enough of us do it. And I'm going to challenge you, man. What do you get out of not doing self-care? What's the story you're telling yourself around not doing it? What do you get out of denying it? What do you get about not stepping into it?
I think loads of guys would probably answer that saying they get to feel macho. They don't feel like they need it.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's more fear, Ben. I think it's fear that if I journal, I may see parts of myself I don't fucking want to see. I may experience emotions or truths that I don't think I'm ready for yet. To me, almost every piece of work always comes back to fear. What men don't pursue or do, it's fear. Fear that I will be too much or fear that I'm not enough. You said it earlier. Do I tell my team that I'm angry? That's telling my team I'm too much. It's not telling them I'm not enough. I'm conveying to them I'm too much for them to handle. It's just the opposite side of the same coin.
I think I've always been quite good with self-care. Like I think I see being selfish as a very positive thing. And it's something that I've really, one of my beliefs, if you're a leader, you have to have a team. You have to treat yourself like a pro athlete. Like I have a therapist, coach, I have a masseur, I've got, psychotherapist, I've got a nutritionist, I got the works, I've got a team. And do I pay all of those people every week? No, but they are all in my wheelhouse. Like they're all in my kind of team, and they help me with different things. And I'm always forever going to different people for different things that I need help with. And I don't think enough leaders treat themselves like a pro. They treat themselves like an amateur. Like if I would say you can never run a Premiership football team with a Sunday League mindset. I think that so many leaders, men and women, treat themselves like an amateur. And I think that's like a big thing, is like self-care is you have to take a pro attitude to it. You have to bring that level of getting the right people on the bus to help you perform at your best, like in any part of your life, your work, your career, whatever it is.
I love the way that your language speaks to the level of achiever you are. You say, I have to. I hear non-negotiable.
Yeah, it has to be.
And yet, I wonder if men who are listening to this are coming here because they're looking up to you for that very thing. I believe in giving men permission slips. I'm giving them permission to get to do these things. They don't have to. They get to do these things, and they get to wade in and test whatever it is that they're efforting to do. For me personally, if it's something I have to do, I can start to resent it. So it's a different way of coming to the effort of putting in the work. I grew up on a farm. There were so many things that we had to do that I resented after a while, them not being negotiable. So I use language I get to, and it helps me. Now the pressure's off and I'm free. I still choose to do it, but I'm free. I don't have to. So whatever language works for people, they should do. Normally I don't should on things, but in this case, they should do that.
Yeah. I think going back to your question is like, how do you get to the place where you exercise is unconditional? I freaking love it. And like, I absolutely love it. That's probably the real truth of it. I can't wait to get out on the road or in the gym every day because I'm excited about it, and I've created that way of thinking about it. I don't have to do that workout I wasn't looking forward to. You see these memes on the internet saying, yeah, there's always going to be the workout you don't look forward to, and you got to get it done. And like when people hear me talk about non-negotiable, they probably think that I have that same kind of mindset as like, I just go there and just do it anyway, even if I wasn't enjoying it. I was like, no, I don't. I really don't. I've created a way of training that I love. I love the exercises I do. I have to go somewhere I love, and I love the feeling it gives me before, during, and after. So I think that, and this is something I teach in the Mile Deep Mastermind, like that the love is actually the way to get things done in the long. It's like it's a force that just doesn't run out. Whereas if I was to base my exercise from fear, I fear that if I don't exercise, that I break a habit. I fear that if I don't exercise, I'll get fat. I fear that I won't look good. If that was my driver, I think that's got a shelf life. So I think that's the difference. So that's what it's led me to seeing.
Everyone gets tired of living under a tyrant, especially when that tyrant is themselves.
I love that. That's so good. That's so powerful.
I can make my schedule so it's a tyrant, and I hate my calendar. I can make my workout so it's a tyrant, and I hate my working out. I can make my relationship so that feels like a tyrant. And I will eventually hate my relationship. We live in so much beautiful freedom that we get to choose a lot of what we do or don't do. And men are choosing things because they're seeing it online. They're seeing somebody do it, and it's like, oh, well, it might get me 3 more years of my life. I should do it. I'm going to hate it for the next 40 years, but it might get me an extra 3. Oh, and I can hate those 3 too.
I remember a guy actually I coached, and he was a vegan because his wife, I think, sold it to him, and he hated his food. It's just like, I remember like, even the way he talked about being a vegan in front of other guys, it was like, dude, you're trying to sell us being a vegan, like you're not converted. And it's just like, you can just see it as like, oh, poor guy.
His diet is a tyrant. Exactly.
His diet was a tyrant.
Oh, well, that. Yeah. I'm vegetarian, and I love being vegetarian, and I do it for a number of different reasons. I was vegan for probably 12 or 13 years, and it became a tyrant in my life. I got to the point where I was so bloody bored with food that I couldn't handle it anymore. So I added variety. And to me, the opposite of tyrant is freedom. And I love feeling like I have choice. I love feeling like I can have so many options. The trick is for me not being overwhelmed by them, so I don't do anything.
Yeah, actually, there's actually in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, the exploration of like masculine psychology, there is the tyrant king. And I was to look at the traits of the tyrant king, it's like overly controlled, creates stability through control and tightly created systems. And I was like, yeah, I can see that. I can see where people lead their life like that.
So just for the sake of leadership purposes, for the nice guys listening, just described is actually a tyrant queen. Most men, most nice guys end up with a tyrant queen. If you think about the characteristics you just offered, that's how their women often show up.
Yeah. Have you found the female equivalent of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover? Have you found it anywhere?
I think you can just feminize those. Inside of every woman is a warrior. Yeah, make no mistake,
I was,
right?
Because I led a women's group because we had Awakened Man, Awakened Woman, and like I introduced, because when we shared King, Warrior, Magician, Lover concept with men, they got it. Like they really like, oh my gosh, I haven't examined my internal throne. I haven't, I've got an overactive warrior. They can really resonate with that. But I didn't get the same buy-in from women, but I get it that you'd probably have to use very similar language, but it was a masculine psychology framework, really.
So whenever I'm working with a group, one of the things that I do is instead of bringing in my language and having them use it, I bring in my language and then we adapt it to what's correct for them. So I would have offered those 4 archetypes and then taken a pulse of the women and said, reclassify these, rename them.
Yeah, I did.
With all of these characteristics, what would you call them?
I was just interested because there's so much good quality stuff around for men, but it wasn't the same for women.
Yes.
It's actually what I based my leadership model on. Like I've created a leadership model, and it basically is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, but it is a nice middle ground between men and women and more modern. And that's what the Mile Deep model is. It's like self-leadership, self-discipline, self-development, the magician, and then self-love, which is the lover. And I've actually done a lot of work recently on it, and it's been really powerful. I've learned so much. When you're like in creation mode, been in creation for the last 2 or 3 months on this. So, Troy, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm gonna ask you back on to just go Mile Deep again, because I've just really enjoyed our conversation. I've read loads, and I really enjoyed again talking to you, and I'd happily have another discussion. I really wanted you to share where someone can go and find you after listening to this. If they've really resonated with what you've shared and talked about, they would want to contact you for any of your services, you just let rip and just kind of tell us where they can find you, and I'll put the links in the show notes as well.
Thanks, Ben. We can connect on my website, troydaronco.com, TroyDaronco.com. I do work quite a bit one-on-one, but my passion right now is groups. A business partner and I, Mackenzie and I, created groupsformen.com about 6 months ago. It's very much a growing community of men, a lot of whom are nice guys. And groupsformen.com is so much about a brotherhood, connecting with each other, developing friendships, but getting support. So men come in, they get coached. A typical group is what's your low for the week, high for the week, and predominant emotion. And what men get to do in that environment is be able to, again, come back to the idea, oh man, me too. Yeah, I'm feeling that same way about my relationship. I'm stuck in the same places. Men get coached, but they also get to give each other feedback, support. And some of these men are blown away by the fact that other men want to engage in their life. So many of the men that I work with, they don't feel like anybody's interested in them. And all of a sudden they go from saying, I don't know how to articulate my emotions or how to be in relationship to, wow, I think I'm getting this. We all get to be a work in progress. So I appreciate you very much, Ben. I look forward to being back on. And I would love to be able to support you and other men in any way that I can.
Troy, it's been absolutely pleasurable. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and we'll definitely have to jam again. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Take care.